convoy stretched for nearly a mile through the heart of Seoul. 42 black limousines, a police escort, and 3 news helicopters circling overhead like vultures waiting for a story. Inside the lead car, dressed in a tailored white and gold hanbok suit hybrid that had cost more than most people's homes, sat Kang Ji-hoon, 39 years old, chairman of Hanseong Global Group, and, according to every headline that morning, the luckiest groom in Korea. He did not feel lucky. He felt nothing at all, which was worse. Ji-hoon had learned, over 11 long years, how to build walls so thick that grief could not find a crack to slip through. He smiled when cameras pointed at him. He shook hands. He said the right things at the right moments. Today, his mother had told him, would be the final piece of a perfect life. A merger disguised as a wedding, a partnership disguised as love. Then the car slowed at a red light on Sejongdaro, and Ji-hoon glanced out the tinted window, and the walls he had spent 11 years building came crashing down in less than 3 seconds. At the crosswalk stood a woman in a simple beige coat, her braided hair pulled back, her posture tired but proud. Beside her stood 3 boys, no older than 10, holding hands, waiting for the light to change. One of them laughed at something his brother said, tilting his head back, and in that single gesture, Ji-hoon saw himself as a child in every old photograph his mother had ever shown him. His pulse roared in his ears. His hands, usually so steady in boardrooms and courtrooms and hostile takeovers, began to shake. "Stop the car," he said. His assistant, Park Do-yoon, blinked from the front seat. "Sir? We're 2 minutes from the venue. 600 guests are." "Stop the car," Ji-hoon repeated, louder now, his voice cracking down the middle like glass. "Stop the entire convoy. Now." Do-yoon's hand hovered over the radio for half a second too long. Ji-hoon didn't wait. He threw open the door himself, ignoring the shouts of his security team, and stepped directly into moving traffic on his own wedding day, in front of 2 news helicopters, 42 cars, and 600 guests who had no idea their groom had just vanished from the world they thought they understood. If you're new here, welcome to Story Nest Tales. Kindly like, subscribe, and drop a comment, because you are not ready for where this story is about to go. Stay with us. The woman at the crosswalk turned at the sound of car doors slamming and shouting voices, and when her eyes met his, the color drained from her face so completely that one of the boys reached up and grabbed her sleeve. "Amara," Ji-hoon whispered, and the entire street seemed to fall silent around that single word. It was her. 11 years older, thinner in the face, with new lines around eyes that used to look at him like he was the only steady thing in her world. Amara Okoye, the woman who had disappeared from his life without a note, without a call, without a single explanation, and whom he had spent 3 years and an obscene amount of money trying to find, before his mother had finally convinced him to stop chasing a ghost and start living his life. "Ji-hoon," she said, and her voice broke on his name. The oldest of the 3 boys stepped forward immediately, placing himself between his mother and the stranger in the expensive suit. He couldn't have been older than 10, but there was something ancient in the way he squared his shoulders. "Who are you?" the boy demanded. "Why is Mom shaking?" Ji-hoon barely heard him. He was staring at the boy's face, the shape of the jaw, the particular arch of the eyebrows, features that belonged to Ji-hoon's own father in every portrait hanging in the Hanseong family estate. A security guard, finally catching up, reached for Ji-hoon's arm. "Chairman Kang, the guests are waiting, we need to—" "Do not touch me," Ji-hoon said, without even turning his head, and something in his tone made the guard step back immediately. Behind them, the traffic light cycled from red to green to red again. Cars honked. Pedestrians slowed to stare at the strange scene of a groom in wedding attire crouched in the middle of a crosswalk. None of it registered. Ji-hoon's entire world had narrowed to 3 small faces and the woman standing frozen among them. "How old are you?" Ji-hoon asked the boy, his voice unsteady. 10, the boy answered warily. "Why does that matter to you?" 10. 11 years ago, minus 9 months of pregnancy. Minus the 11 months Amara had vanished before he even knew she was carrying his child. The math assembled itself in Ji-hoon's mind with brutal, undeniable precision. "Amara," he said again, stepping closer, ignoring his security detail's frantic attempts to create a perimeter around him. Who are these boys? Amara opened her mouth. No sound came out. Her eyes filled with 11 years of things she had never said. The youngest boy, smaller and quieter than his brothers, tugged at her coat sleeve and asked in a small voice, "Mom, why is everyone looking at us like that? Mom." He had called her mom in front of Ji-hoon, in front of a growing crowd, in front of cameras that had already begun turning away from the wedding convoy toward the stranger scene unfolding in the middle of downtown Seoul traffic. Ji-hoon's knees nearly buckled. "They're mine," he breathed. "Aren't they? They're my sons." Amara's composure finally shattered. Tears spilled down her face as she nodded, once, then again, unable to stop. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this." The oldest boy, his name, Ji-hoon would soon learn, was Min-seo, stared between his mother and the stranger with a dawning, furious understanding. "You're our father?" he said, the word coming out sharp as a blade. "Where have you been for 10 years? Ji-hoon had no answer. For the first time in his adult life, the most powerful businessman in Korea had absolutely nothing to say. Behind him, Ji-hoon's phone would not stop ringing. 600 guests were still waiting at the venue. His fiancée, Yoon Soo-jin, was standing at the altar in a $200,000 gown, checking the time with growing unease. News vans that had been positioned to cover a fairy tale wedding were now repositioning their cameras toward a scene that would soon detonate across every headline in the country. But Ji-hoon didn't move. He crouched down at eye level with 3 boys who shared his blood and none of his memories, and he asked the only question that mattered. "Can I know your names?" The middle boy, more curious than cautious, answered first.
I'm Jae-hoon.
He pointed to his brothers in turn. "That's Min-seo, he's the oldest by 4 minutes. And that's Taeon, he's the youngest, he doesn't talk much." Triplets. 3 sons, born on the same day, carrying features that made denial impossible. Ji-hoon looked at Taeon, the quiet one, who stared back at him with wide, careful eyes. Eyes that were unmistakably his own. "I need to understand everything," Ji-hoon said, rising slowly, turning back to Amara. "I need to know why you left. I need to know why you never told me. I need—" "Not here," Amara said quickly, glancing at the cameras now openly filming them. "Please, not like this. Not in front of them." Ji-hoon looked over his shoulder at the convoy of cars still idling in the street, at his assistant's pale, panicked face, at the wedding that was supposedly happening in less than 10 minutes. Something inside him, something that had been frozen for 11 years, finally cracked open completely. "Do-yoon," he said without turning around, "cancel the wedding." "Sir, you cannot be serious. I said cancel it." His voice was calm now, terrifyingly calm. "Tell them the groom isn't coming. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. I have a family I didn't know I had, and I am not walking away from them again." To understand how a man could stand in the middle of Seoul traffic and cancel the biggest wedding of the year, you have to go back 11 years, to a rainy afternoon at a community volunteer center on the outskirts of the city, where a tired, 28-year-old Ji-hoon, not yet chairman, still fighting to prove himself worthy of his father's company, had been assigned to help distribute meals to families in need. Amara had been there too, a young Nigerian graduate student volunteering while she finished her master's degree, laughing easily with the elderly Koreans who adored her, speaking passable Korean with an accent that made children giggle and grandmothers pinch her cheeks with delight. Ji-hoon had dropped an entire tray of rice the first time she smiled at him. She had laughed so hard she had to sit down. "You're the chairman's son," she had said later, when someone finally told her who he was. "I thought rich men like you didn't know how to be clumsy." "I didn't either," Ji-hoon had admitted. "Until about 10 minutes ago." "Well," Amara had said, still laughing, wiping a tear from her eye, "there's a first time for everything, chairman's son. Come. Help me clean this up before your reputation suffers any further damage." They had knelt together on the wet floor, scooping rice back into trays, and somewhere between the laughter and the mess, something had shifted between them that neither could quite name yet. What followed was 6 months of stolen afternoons, of late-night phone calls that stretched until sunrise, of Ji-hoon learning to cook jollof rice badly in Amara's tiny apartment while she taught him Igbo phrases he butchered so completely she cried laughing. He learned that she hummed old high-life songs while she cooked, that she wrote letters to her mother in Lagos every single week, that she had come to Korea chasing a scholarship and had somehow, without meaning to, found a home instead. "Marry me," Ji-hoon had told her one evening on a park bench overlooking the Han River. No ring yet, no plan, just the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I don't care what my mother says. I don't care what the board says. I have never wanted anything the way I want a life with you." Amara had laughed through her tears that night too, pressing her forehead to his. "Ask me again when you actually have a ring, chairman's son. Then I'll believe you're serious." It was the first time in his adult life he had felt like a person instead of an heir. He had never planned to fall in love with a foreign volunteer his mother would never approve of. He had never planned on much of anything, and yet within a year, he had bought the ring, and within 18 months, he intended to marry her regardless of what his mother said. His mother, Madame Seo Hai-rin, had other plans entirely. She had summoned Amara to a private meeting without Ji-hoon's knowledge. A meeting Amara never told him about, not then, not for 11 years. "You will never be accepted in this family," Madame Seo had told her, according to what Amara would eventually confess. "You will humiliate my son. You will humiliate this company. If you truly love him, you will disappear, and you will let him marry someone worthy of the Kong name." "I love your son," Amara had told her plainly. Sitting across from Madame Seo in a private tea room Amara had never been invited to before, and would never be invited to again. "I don't care about the Kong name. I care about him." "That is precisely the problem," Madame Seo had replied, her voice like ice wrapped in silk. "Love is a luxury poor women cannot afford in families like mine. You will humiliate my son. You will humiliate this company. If you truly love him, you will disappear, and you will let him marry someone worthy of the Kong name." Amara had refused, again and again, across 3 separate meetings Ji-hoon never knew had taken place. She had told Madame Seo she loved Ji-hoon and that nothing would change that. That was when the threats began. Madame Seo had warned her that the Hanseong Group's legal team could make Amara's student visa disappear within a week. She had warned that Amara's scholarship could be quietly revoked through connections at the university, that her family back in Lagos could face consequences through business contacts Madame Seo controlled across half of West Africa. And when none of that moved her, Madame Seo had done something far crueler. She had convinced Amara, through fabricated documents and a carefully staged conversation with a hired actor posing as Ji-hoon's lawyer, that Ji-hoon himself had asked his mother to make the problem disappear, that he was simply too cowardly to say it to her face. "He asked me to handle this quietly," the hired actor had told a devastated Amara, sliding a folder of forged correspondence across the table. "He says he hopes you'll understand. He has a company to protect." Amara had stared at documents that looked, to her grieving eyes, unmistakably real. She had no reason then to suspect a mother capable of such elaborate cruelty toward her own son's happiness. Amara had believed it, heartbroken, pregnant, and utterly alone in a foreign country. She had packed one suitcase and disappeared without a trace, believing she was protecting Ji-hoon from a scandal he had supposedly asked to be spared from. She never knew she was carrying triplets until a doctor's visit 2 months later, alone in a small apartment in Incheon, sobbing over an ultrasound that showed 3 heartbeats instead of 1. Ji-hoon, meanwhile, had searched for her obsessively for nearly 3 years. Private investigators, immigration records, even quiet trips to Nigeria that led nowhere. Madame Seo had watched her son destroy himself over a woman she believed she had successfully erased, and she had said nothing, done nothing, corrected nothing. Eventually, exhausted and broken, Ji-hoon had let his mother convince him to move on, to accept an arranged engagement to Yoon Soo-jin, a marriage built on business logic instead of love. He never stopped thinking about Amara. He simply stopped believing he would ever see her again. Now, standing in the middle of a Seoul intersection with 3 sons he never knew existed, all of that carefully constructed peace had shattered in an instant. Back at the venue, chaos had already taken hold long before Ji-hoon arrived. Ji-hoon stood at the entrance, phone pressed to his ear, sweat soaking through his collar as he fielded calls from the wedding planner, the caterers, and 3 separate board members demanding to know why the chairman had abandoned his own convoy in the middle of downtown traffic. "Tell them there's been a family emergency," Ji-hoon said into the phone for the 10th time, glancing nervously at the growing crowd of reporters gathering outside. "Tell them anything. Just don't tell them the truth yet." Inside the hall, Yoon Soo-jin stood at the altar in her $200,000 gown, checking her watch for the 4th time in 10 minutes. A small, cold knot of dread tightening in her stomach with every passing second. Guests whispered behind their programs. Madame Seo, seated in the front row, kept glancing toward the entrance with an expression that no one else in the room could yet read as fear. "Something is wrong," Soo-jin murmured to her mother beside her. "He would never be late. Not today." She had no way of knowing that, less than a mile away, the man she was about to marry was kneeling in the middle of a crosswalk, discovering he had 3 sons he never knew existed. The venue was chaos by the time Ji-hoon finally arrived. Not as a groom, but as a man walking through the front doors with Amara at his side and 3 boys holding tightly to their mother's hands. 600 guests turned in their seats. Camera flashes exploded like gunfire. Yoon Soo-jin stood frozen at the altar, her bouquet trembling in her hands, watching her fiancé walk toward her with a woman and 3 children she had never seen in her life. "Ji-hoon," she said quietly as he approached. "What is happening? Who are they?" He took the microphone from a stunned officiant before anyone could stop him, and his voice, amplified across the entire hall, carried a weight that silenced even the most whispered conversations in the back rows. "I owe everyone here the truth," Ji-hoon said, his hand trembling slightly as he held the microphone. 11 years ago, I loved a woman named Amara Okoye. I planned to marry her. I was told she left me. I have since learned that she was manipulated into leaving, threatened and deceived by someone I trusted completely." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Madame Seo, seated in the front row in an elaborate hanbok, went pale as marble. "These are my sons," Ji-hoon continued, gesturing to the 3 boys standing close to Amara, overwhelmed by the size of the crowd and the blinding flashes of 100 cameras. "Triplets, 10 years old. I did not know they existed until 40 minutes ago, when I saw them crossing a street on what was supposed to be my wedding day." He turned to Soo-jin, whose eyes had filled with tears, not of heartbreak, but of dawning, humiliating realization. "Soo-jin SSI," he said gently. "You are a kind, wonderful woman, and you deserved so much better than to be part of an arrangement built on a lie I didn't even know I was living. I am so sorry. This is not fair to you, and I will make sure everyone in this room understands that none of this is your fault." Soo-jin stared at him for a long, silent moment. Then, with a composure that earned a quiet ripple of respect through the stunned crowd, she set down her bouquet on the altar. "I think," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks, "I always knew something in this engagement felt hollow. I just didn't know it was because you were still grieving someone you didn't know was still alive." She looked at the 3 boys, then back at Ji-hoon. "Go be their father. That's more important than any wedding." She walked out through a side door with quiet dignity, leaving behind 600 guests who would talk about this moment for years, and a hall descending rapidly into chaos as reporters shouted questions and guests whispered behind their hands. Madame Seo rose from her seat, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. "Ji-hoon, you will regret this performance," she hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "You are destroying this family's reputation over some foreign woman and her." "Careful, mother," Ji-hoon said, his voice suddenly ice-cold. "Choose your next words very carefully because I am beginning to understand exactly what you did 11 years ago, and I promise you we will discuss it in detail very soon." Madame Seo's mouth snapped shut. For the first time in longer than Ji-hoon could remember, his mother looked afraid. The weeks that followed were nothing like the fairy tale endings people imagine when a billionaire finds his lost family. There was no instant harmony, no easy transition from strangers to father and sons. Ji-hoon moved Amara and the boys into a quiet countryside estate an hour outside Seoul. Not the imposing Hanseong mansion, which Amara refused to step foot in, but a modest, warm house with a garden and enough space for 3 boys to finally stop feeling like guests in their own lives. Min Seo remained guarded for months. He had spent 10 years being the man of the house, protecting his mother and brothers with a maturity no child should need, and he did not easily hand that responsibility to a stranger, however biologically related. "You don't get to just show up and be dad," Min Seo told him bluntly one evening, arms crossed, refusing to sit at the dinner table Ji-hoon had prepared. Badly, but with real effort. "Dad is someone who was there. You weren't there." "You're right," Ji-hoon said quietly, not arguing, not defending himself. "I wasn't there and I can't undo that. But I'm here now every single day, for as long as you'll let me try." Jae-hyun, the middle brother, adjusted faster, peppering Ji-hoon with endless questions. About business, about helicopters, about whether being a chairman meant he could get them out of school whenever he wanted. The answer, disappointingly for Jae-hyun, was no. His curiosity became the bridge that slowly, gently, pulled his brothers closer to trusting the stranger who was trying so hard to become their father. Taeyeon, the youngest and quietest, took the longest. He watched Ji-hoon from doorways and stair landings for weeks, saying almost nothing, offering no warmth and no hostility, simply observing. It wasn't until one rainy Tuesday evening, when Ji-hoon sat on the porch fixing a broken kite instead of taking an important overseas call, that Taeyeon finally walked over, sat beside him without a word, and silently handed him a roll of tape. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Ji-hoon nearly cried over a child's kite in a way he had never cried in any boardroom, courtroom, or funeral. Small moments like that one became the quiet architecture of a new family. There were school pickups where Ji-hoon stood awkwardly among other parents, unsure of the small talk they seemed to manage so easily. There were bedtime stories Ji-hoon read badly at first, stumbling over voices for characters, until Jae-hyun started coaching him on which voice belonged to which villain. There was a disastrous first attempt at a family dinner where Ji-hoon tried to cook the jollof rice Amara had once taught him, badly burning the bottom of the pot, and all 3 boys laughing so hard that even Min Seo, still cautious, still guarded, cracked a genuine smile for the first time since meeting his father. "It's supposed to taste like this?" Ji-hoon insisted, scraping burnt rice onto plates while Amara covered her face, laughing helplessly. "This is a very traditional way to serve it." "You're a terrible liar for a billionaire," Min Seo said, and though his tone stayed flat, there was something almost warm hiding underneath it. The first crack in a wall that had taken 10 years to build. Not every day was gentle. There were nights Min Seo locked himself in his room, overwhelmed by a decade of unspoken anger finally surfacing all at once. There were mornings Amara caught Ji-hoon standing outside the boys' bedroom door at dawn, simply listening to them breathe, as though making up for every morning he had missed. But slowly, month by month, the distance narrowed. Amara watched all of this unfold with a complicated ache in her chest. Relief that her sons finally had a father, guilt for the 11 years she had unknowingly denied them one, and a lingering, unhealed wound from believing, for over a decade, that the man she loved had chosen to abandon her. "I need you to understand something," she told Ji-hoon one night, long after the boys had gone to sleep, her voice trembling with old grief. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I believed loving you was hurting you. Your mother made me believe I was protecting you by disappearing." "I know," Ji-hoon said softly, reaching for her hand and finding, to his quiet relief, that she didn't pull away. "And I will spend the rest of my life making up for the years that lie stole from us. From all 4 of you." Just as the family began to find something resembling peace, one final storm arrived to test everything they had rebuilt. Madame Seo Hai-rin collapsed during a company gala 3 months later, rushed to the hospital with what doctors initially feared was a stroke. It turned out to be severe stress-induced heart failure, a body finally breaking under the weight of guilt she had refused to acknowledge for over a decade. From her hospital bed, pale and stripped of the icy composure that had defined her for 63 years, Madame Seo finally told the truth in full. Every threat, every fabricated document, every lie constructed to drive Amara away and protect a family reputation that, in the end, meant nothing beside her son's shattered 11 years. "I convinced myself I was protecting this family," she whispered, tears sliding down a face Ji-hoon had never once seen cry. "I told myself she wasn't good enough, that the company couldn't survive the scandal. I destroyed 2 lives and stole 3 grandchildren from myself, and I called it protection. I am so sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it." Heartsuit. Amara stood at the hospital room door for a long moment, 3 boys waiting anxiously in the hallway behind her, before she finally stepped inside. "I spent 11 years hating a woman I'd never truly met," Amara said quietly. "I'm not ready to forgive you today. Maybe I won't be ready tomorrow either. But my sons believe people deserve the chance to become better than their worst mistake, and I think I want to believe that too." It was Taeyeon, the quiet one, who finally closed the distance no adult in that room could manage. He walked to his grandmother's bedside, studied her tearful face with the same careful patience he'd once studied his father's, and said simply, "Are you going to be okay now?" Madame Seo broke down completely at the innocence of the question, reaching for her grandson's small hand as if it were the only solid thing left in a life built on decades of carefully controlled lies. Forgiveness did not arrive instantly, and the story does not pretend it did. It arrived slowly, in visits that grew less tense, in a grandmother learning her grandson's favorite foods, in Amara allowing Madame Seo 1 supervised afternoon a week, then 2, then eventually full weekends, watching carefully, healing slowly, refusing to erase the past but also refusing to let it own the future. There were setbacks along the way. One afternoon, Amara arrived early to collect the boys and overheard Madame Seo instructing the household staff in the old, imperious tone Amara remembered too well, and old wounds flared instantly back to life. They argued in the hallway, voices rising, years of unspoken resentment spilling out at once, until Minaseo, the same boy who had once refused to trust either of them, stepped between the 2 women and asked, quietly, "Can we please just try? For us?" Both women fell silent, ashamed, and slowly, painfully, chose to keep trying. 2 years later, the Hanseong family estate hosted something it had never hosted before. A garden wedding beneath blooming cherry trees, small and quiet. Nothing like the 600-guest spectacle that had collapsed on live television 2 years prior. This time, there were no cameras invited, no press releases, no business mergers disguised as romance. Just Ji-hoon, in a simple gray suit, waiting at the end of a flower-lined aisle for Amara, radiant in a cream-colored gown that mixed traditional Korean embroidery with West African beadwork sewn by Amara's own mother, flown in from Lagos for the occasion. Minaseo walked his mother down the aisle, tall now, no longer the guarded boy who had once refused to call Ji-hoon anything but the stranger. Jae-hyun served as best man, delivering a toast so long and detailed that guests were crying from laughter before the reception even began. And Taeyeon, quiet as ever but smiling now, softly and often, stood beside his father at the altar, holding the rings. "So," Jae-hyun said loudly during the reception, grinning at his parents across the garden, "does this mean you 2 are finally, officially, on your honeymoon? 10 years late, but who's counting?" Laughter rippled across the garden, and Amara looked at Ji-hoon, tears of pure joy finally replacing 11 years of tears born from grief. "Better 10 years late," Ji-hoon said, pulling her close as the evening sun spilled gold across the blossoms, "than never at all. If the story moved you, that's exactly why we tell them. Because love, truth, and family always find their way back to each other, no matter how long the road." If you enjoyed this journey, please like this video, subscribe to Story Nest Tales for more emotional stories just like this one, and let us know in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. We read every single one. See you in the next story.